19 budget to order, please. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, thank you very much. So we'll move into the delegations. And delegations, just so you know that there are 10 minutes each, and some who have maybe registered later have 5 minutes. Also, in terms of rules of engagement, there's no demonstrations, no clapping, no cheering, no booing, no hissing, anything along those kinds of lines. This is a public meeting where we expect that everyone respects the views of everyone who has the courage to come to the podium and share input into the 2019 budget. And in advance, I thank all of the delegations who have registered to appear here tonight. Okay, so the first delegation we have is Mr. David Blake. Welcome, David.
Good evening, Councillor Strickland, members of the Regional Council, and residents of Waterloo Region. I have also with me Paul Parker from the University of Waterloo, and Mary Jane Patterson, our AG, is here as well. My name is Dave Blake. I'm the Associate Director of Reef Green Solutions, and I'm here to speak to you in support of the budget. Okay. I think I was loud enough. I don't know, I need to start all over again. So, thank you. Reef Green Solutions, now entering our 20th year, has been working with residents of Waterloo Region to help them live sustainably from day one. We deliver programs focused on energy efficiency, water conservation, waste reduction, and stormwater management. And we're looking to be able to engage residents from Waterloo Region in more than one conversation as we seek to help residents address climate change. And Project Neutral will be key to this direction. Project Neutral is a proven tool and engagement platform that helps people take action on climate issues. When residents talk about their home energy use, their personal transportation, their food, and their waste consumption, they inspire each other to make lifestyle changes that can significantly reduce their climate impact and have a positive ripple effect in our community. Reef Green Solutions brought Project Neutral's tool and engagement platform to Waterloo Region last summer. It will be the conversation starter for residents to understand their complete carbon footprint, not just their home, but the emissions attributed to their food consumption, their waste reduction, and their personal transportation. To date, with minimal funding, 350 residents have used the tool over the past 7 months. But the volume of engagement needs to increase by an order of magnitude or more to support the action necessary to journey towards the recently adopted long-term reduction target. In 2018, the United Nations Panel on Climate Change released a report urging fundamental changes to the way that we live and the need to move away from fossil fuels by 2030. In 2018, the Environmental Commissioner of Ontario stated in her 2018 Greenhouse Gas Progress Report that the province of Ontario was on the right track towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions and that emissions were at the lowest level since 1990. While there have been changes recently, there are lessons that we can still take from the ECO's report. It's not too late if we all work together. We need to take action. We need to emphasize efficiency first. There needs to be an investment in solutions. It is up to all of us to take steps towards greenhouse gas emission reductions to take meaningful action. Many residents in Waterloo Region do not know where to start or what can they do. Project Neutral and funding this budget paper can help answer that question. What can I do? In 2018, there were great steps taken locally. Through the leadership of regional staff and all of you around the Horseshoe, there was significant progress in the fight against climate change in Waterloo Region. On the 6th of June, the Regional Council approved a long-term greenhouse gas emission reduction target of 80% by 2050. As part of that target, approximately 20% of those emissions are in homes, and half of those emissions are from transportation in the region. By supporting the residential Project Neutral program budget request, you will be continuing the great progress that was made local in 2018. Supporting this budget paper would provide the needed capacity to engage more residents in Waterloo Region, coach them to make the transformational changes that are necessary to move Waterloo Region towards that 80% reduction target by 2050. This funding will also be leveraged by REAP on funding requests to the federal government and other funders, most of these funders require matching dollars. And this will allow this funding to be multiplied many times over. In particular, by including this funding, plus in-kind support from REAP from the University of Waterloo, we requested another additional $100,000 annually over 2 years from Natural Resources Canada to provide even greater capacity. And we hope to receive confirmation of this funding in the spring. Climate change is the most pervasive problem, and it will affect all of us. It is not too late, but we must continue acting now to build a climate-resilient community in Waterloo Region. And by supporting and funding this budget paper, it will be another step forward in this journey for the residents of Waterloo Region. I'd like to thank you for your consideration of this important project, and I'm now going to pass it over to Paul Parker.
Thank you. Members of Council, my name is Paul Parker. I'm a Professor, Associate Dean, Faculty of Environment, and Founding Board Member at REAP Green Solutions. I'm glad to be here to speak in support of the budget paper, Residential Project Neutral. Last February, Council approved the Community Energy Investment Strategy to improve and sustain Waterloo Region's economic competitiveness and quality of life through targeted energy investments. The strategy identified that $2.1 billion is spent every year on energy, and 87% of these dollars leave our community. We would like to help keep some of those dollars in our community. Supporting this budget item would support keeping more dollars in the region, contribute to one of the Community Energy Investment Strategy's action, that is the one-window service for improving energy conservation and efficiency in homes, by enabling incentives, information, education, and behavior programs to be coordinated. Not only would the Residential Project Neutral support this goal, it will encourage residents to make significant improvements in their home energy efficiency. Retrofitting houses reduces emissions and stimulates our local economy. On average, people spend $9,000 for their retrofits. Last year, REAP estimated the projects that they were involved with contributed over $3 million in the local economy. More people who complete deeper retrofits will make a greater impact on the local economy. So this project enables us to reach more people and to grow that retrofit economy. As a researcher at the University of Waterloo, I want to assist our community, Waterloo Region, to achieve its climate goal, the 80% reduction by 2050. In particular, we want to analyze results, identify what strategies are most effective, engage different groups of people, and help develop improved tools. The development and widespread adoption of tools like Project Neutral will also help UW achieve its own climate targets, especially in indirect areas like commuting. The lessons learned will also be shared so that other communities can more easily achieve their goals. And finally, the creation of opportunities for students to assist with engagement strategies will provide valuable experiential learning that will help build capacity for the Project Neutral team. In this way, UW can achieve its research, education, dissemination, and environmental performance goals, working with valued partners. Project Neutral helps people see the range of actions that cause their carbon footprint. It informs them so they can make better decisions aligned with their priorities. They choose. They can start with their home, their travel, or other options. But research shows once you start and have success in one area, you're more likely to take action in another. So we welcome the opportunity to partner with REAP Green Solutions and Project Neutral to help Waterloo residents reduce their emissions and share their success to inspire others. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We really appreciate that. There's going to be no final decision tonight. We have all your information. Decision will be made on February 19th.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Luke McCann. Welcome, Luke.
Good evening, Regional Chair and members of Regional Council, Chair Strickland, Budget Committee. For those of you who have not met me, my name is Luke McCann. I'm the president of QP Local 5191, representing the Region of Waterloo Paramedics and Logistics Support Staff. I'm here today to address the current state of our paramedic service. It's no secret that the service is operating well over capacity, and we believe that our current budget brought forward to you requesting the 2 12-hour ambulances is simply not enough. The region's paramedic service is failing, and the staff are bearing the weight of this failure. The request for paramedic services is growing 4 times faster than the rate of population growth, and the call volume is expected to grow by another 60% over the next 10 years. Over the course of the last 10 years, we have witnessed the demands for service increase by 50%, yet we have only added 6 24-hour ambulances and 1 12-hour emergency response unit. This is why we are not keeping up with the demands. It is time to stop being reactive and playing catch-up. We rely heavily on surrounding paramedic services to service our calls, which is both irresponsible and dangerous to all communities involved. The Region of Waterloo Paramedic Service has the lowest ambulance in-service hours per 1,000 people of population in the province. And this is according to the 2017 Municipal Benchmarking Report, also known as the MBNA. It continues to be the lowest funded paramedic service in the province to comparable municipalities, despite being the second fastest growing region in Ontario, according to the 2016 Census Report. We would need to increase our current staffing levels by 40% or 110 hours to even reach the provincial median. The 2016 Census Report also points out that regional funding is only $25.15 per person, while our comparators are funding between $35 and $50 per person, which results in a high-performance-based system, leading to less impact on labor costs and stress of the workforce. We support this model of funding to move towards a more performance-based system rather than an effort-based. The citizens of Waterloo Region also support an increase in the funding to bring our service up to a high-performing level, which was clearly supported by the Regional Budget Survey. 82.6% of the respondents were in favor of increasing property taxes to obtain this goal. When I was sitting in here earlier this evening, I saw the latest budget survey, also quite strong in favor of supporting our service and bringing it up to a better performing level. In 2015, the Region of Waterloo spent $150,000 to have the consultant company Apex Pro create a 10-year paramedic services master plan from 2017 to 2027. The region wanted a clear plan and sought guidance on how to effectively provide service to the region in a cost-effective manner. The message we are receiving is that the budgetary and resource increases are in line with the master plan. However, they are not. In 2019, the projected staffing forecast, page 35 of the Paramedic Services Master Plan, calls for 27 peak ambulances. Even with the addition of the 1 24-hour ambulance in this year's budget, we would still be short by 3 24-hour ambulances. If we take into account the realization in the report brought forward by the Chief of Paramedic Services on January 29th, that our response volumes are running approximately 1.5 to 2 years in advance of the expected call volumes, then we are actually short by 6 24-hour ambulances. The problem is we are not following this plan or the staffing projections, and the plan itself is behind on the call volume projections, leading to an even larger gap in service in subsequent failure to meet these specific targets. The current peak ambulance coverage is stated to be 23. However, we believe this number to be skewed as the absolute peak time is only from 1,600 hours to 1,700 hours each day. There is only 1 hour of peak ambulance coverage at 23, and therefore, arguably, the peak ambulance coverage is only at 21. According to the master plan, the staffing requirements in 2019 for the adopted 35% unit utilization rate would be 27 ambulances at peak. So, with the 35% unit utilization in mind, we have a shortfall of 4 24-hour ambulances. If we use the peak of 21, we'd actually be short 6 24-hour ambulances, as I mentioned. And these, of course, would be excluding the additional resources that have been proposed in the 2019 budget, the 2 12-hour ambulances. Our paramedic service continues to operate at a level of 40 to 50% unit utilization, despite the target being 35 as adopted by Council. And we only reach the target unit utilization rate 1/4 of the time. We must acknowledge that the UU rate we are trying to achieve is less than 35%. This shouldn't be viewed as an average. It should be viewed as a peak unit utilization. As acknowledged many times, whenever we are running over 35%, the system is not performing efficiently, resulting in poor response and level of service to the community. This also impacts the health and wellness of staff, leading to increased rates of sickness and lost time due to physical and mental health injuries. Paramedic services that operate at a high unit utilization rate do not have the capacity required to address the sudden influx in calls or the buffer needed to account for offload delays at local hospitals. Obviously, with the report brought forward to Council on January 29th, it is quite evident that our call volume continues to outpace the projections, in 2018 by 8.6% and in 2017 by 7.1%. To put things into perspective, on page 5 of the report I gave to you, the region of Waterloo could possibly be the worst place to have a heart attack. As figure 7.5 of the 2017 municipal benchmarking report explains, the target set by the region for any person to arrive with a defibrillator to a sudden cardiac arrest patient within 6 minutes of the time notices received by dispatch is 50%. Not only is that the lowest target set in the province, but clearly meeting this only 43.8% of the time is another target we fail to meet. We do not believe that our call volume is increased from people unnecessarily calling 911. We believe that this is driven simply by the overall population increase and the increased demand on paramedics in the community to respond to various calls, such as ones related to an aging population, mental health, the opioid crisis, and many others. With these demands for 911 calls requiring ambulances, the code red and code yellow situations are hardly an anomaly. To clarify, here are the definitions of each. Code red system status, no ambulances ready to respond to a 911 call in the region of Waterloo. Code yellow system status is 3 or less ambulances ready to respond to a 911 call in the region of Waterloo. The important point to make here is that we need to have more emphasis on code yellow status. Clearly, a code red is an extremely dangerous situation to be in, but let me explain why a code red is equally as dangerous to the safety of this community. When the system is depleted of all ambulances and enters code red status, the status is cleared when only 1 ambulance becomes available in the entire geographical area of the region, and code yellow status sets into play. A code yellow cannot simply be ignored because the color yellow is perceived to be less important in nature. Code yellow can actually translate to only 1 ambulance available and ready to respond to a call, or typically many calls that have been waiting 30+ minutes already in the entire region at any given time. To put this into context, other paramedic services in the province with populations much less than the region of Waterloo utilize code red system status, or what they refer to as code critical, as 3 ambulances or less. Another example in a comparable municipality, code red is defined as having 1 ambulance available. So code red is not necessarily a universal term. While discussing the topic of offload delays, it is extremely important to note that offload delays in the region are exactly in line with the provincial median for total ambulance turnaround time at a hospital. The provincial median is 21%, according to the 2017 MBNA report, and includes all aspects such as any offload delays, providing a report to the receiving hospital, providing ongoing care, transfer of care, cleaning, restocking, and completing the required patient care documentation. Even in the master plan, Apex Pro concludes that the increases in offload delays are attributed to 2 factors: rapid escalation in service demand and the similar demand increase for hospital services, both driven by a growing and aging population. We are not an anomaly, and offload delays have been here for over 2 decades. It is just simply part of doing business, and what most services in the province have realized is that they are not going anywhere anytime soon. So essentially, putting more ambulances in the system is a large part of the answer in order to handle the fluctuations on a day-to-day or month-to-month basis. Offload delays themselves are not the blame. To look at this a different way, we lose approximately 1 24-hour ambulance per year to offload delays. So how do we continue to place such a heavily weighted excuse on this being the factor of why we do not have enough ambulances to respond to the soaring call volume? A confusing issue is that $4.6 million was cut from paramedic services in 2016 based on the low-end range projections of offload delays, even though the chief had been quite clear that the region has no control over offload delays and that they are volatile and fluctuate over the course of a year or a measured time period. We will continue to work diligently to bring our concerns forward and recognize that input from frontline workers is an invaluable resource for council to make the appropriate decisions that impact our community and our members. I would like to thank you all for taking the time to allow us to present tonight, and and I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. McCann, and you're right on time. 10 minutes bang on. Well done. We do have a couple of questions. Councillor Rubanovic.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Luke, for coming in tonight and for your presentation, and also, as I've said to Chief Van Valkenburg before, thanks to for the work that the men and women of the EMS service do. I've had the need to use it a couple times in the last couple years for my aging mom, and this service has been outstanding. I do want to explore a little further this issue of offload delays. I hear your message loud and clear that that's not the only part of the problem from your perspective. But to what extent do you think things can be done? I mean, as frontline operators, do you think there are things that can be done differently with the hospitals in order to try to address the situation? Because it, quite frankly, doesn't make sense to have you folks there as long as you are, and there needs to be a better alternative in my mind. So either from your colleagues or your experience, are there things that we should be pushing for?
Well, I think council's done that. They've lobbied the provincial government for more money for the offload delay nurse program that was here. I understand that funding was cut. In this current government, I'm not sure how successful we would be trying to lobby for that program and now those monies again. I do know that other municipalities such as Peel have utilized some concepts to reduce offload delays quite significantly. But I think our challenge here in the region of Waterloo is that we just don't have the resources, as I mentioned in the presentation, to act as the buffer to the capacity. So we don't have the capacity to deal with those influxes in call volume and the offloads. So those days where we have 8 or 9 ambulances at any given time rotating throughout offload delays throughout the whole day, we also have record-breaking call volume. I know the chief had said a few years back when he got here, we were doing about 75 calls a day. Now we're doing 150 a day, and we're breaking records every week for call volume. I know 1,000 to 1,100 calls are some of the weeks where we were making record-breaking call volume. So we need just more ambulances available or in the system. And when you throw a 12-hour ambulance at the problem, you don't really feel the impact of that. So that's where we need that infusion of resources to act as that buffer in the system.
Okay, the other question I had for you, and you touched on it, I think, a little bit, is it seems to me that, in addition to call volumes and so on, the scope of some of what we're dealing with is much more complex. So whether we're dealing with people with significant mental health issues or, quite frankly, the opioid crisis, I would imagine this is having a significant impact on your members in terms of dealing with these issues, because it's more complex than, let's say, it was 10, 15 years ago, would be my sense. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the daily stress of that, we are going to a broader range of calls that I could remember, 20 years ago. The mental health, the lack of support in the communities and the provincial level, and the money that supports mental health is a trickle-down effect. We feel that. I know police feel that as well. They feel that with their surge in mental health and opioid-related calls. Well, we're on those calls as well. We don't have the resources to handle when we do have those surges. I know Chief Larkin has referenced a number of times where certain months, there's just a surge of drug-related calls or whatever they may be, mental health, and we're at those calls too. And we're sort of the safety net in the community where the resources are lacking at the hospital levels, and paramedics become, the social workers, the counselors, the mental health workers on the streets. So, we've been brought into that as the community safety net.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McGarry.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Luke, and I'm probably the only one here as a councillor that has spent a great deal of time in the back of a number of ambulances. You know, when I was a critical care nurse, transferring patients from here to there, and have been subject to being dumped out unceremoniously to grab a cab back when, you know, that particular paramedic service was called into the next call, and I had to get out on the way back to the hospital and take another route home. So a lot of what you have to say really hits home to me about some of the issues. I've also worked in the hospitals when we had the offload delay pilot project where extra nurses were hired in order to offload patients in the hallway and to care for them before they could actually be then triaged appropriately into a bed in the emergency department. And I know that that program was very effective at getting the paramedics turned around back in their vehicles and on to the next call. And you're quite right, the funding was cut and was never brought back, but that really did help to resolve some of the issues of the code red or code yellow situations that paramedics find themselves in Waterloo region and other surrounding areas. So that's one program that, as you say, would go a long way in our local hospitals to try and relieve some of the offload delay times that you're experiencing right now. One of the things that I asked Chief Larkin earlier about was the increase in call volume for the mental health and addicted patients that are really adding to the number of calls that we're seeing throughout Waterloo region. And again, also a growing and aging population, and that is also a factor. But there is a program that I've started to reference that's fairly early on in its program, and it's an urgent care mental health clinic that has been piloted in Windsor. And it's a program where Hotel Dieu is putting their mental health workers into an urgent care freestanding clinic a few blocks away from the hospital. It's staffed from 0800 to 2000 hours or 8 p.m. And they also have a system where that's where some of the referral services for those that are suffering from mental health and addictions are turning to. And as I said, they're fairly early on in this particular program, but what I'm hearing, the early results in the last year, is that there's several things that have happened. Number one, when you have appropriate levels of staffing, mental health workers in a facility like that, the paramedics and the police are able to drop their patients much more quickly. They're taken in to be triaged appropriately, and with the result that their response times for paramedic and emergency services are down in Windsor. And the other advantage is that very often those that are suffering from mental health and addictions don't want to go into the hospital, but they're much more easily talked into going to a mental health clinic and to get addressed. So I think that in providing mental health and addiction services in a different way, we may be able to hit on some of the pressures and the pressure points that both the police and the paramedic services are experiencing right now. So in your estimation, do you think that some of the call volume now might be more appropriately and much more rapidly assessed and treated through a clinic like that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too familiar with it, but the concept of it sounds encouraging. If they're, piloting that, it'd be interesting to see how that rolls out. But I think it brings me back to the point I made about, what we're losing in a year for offload delays. Like, to put that into sort of a concept to understand, if we lose approximately 1 24-hour ambulance for the calendar year because of offload delays, is that really where we point the finger? I mean, one ambulance, 24 hours in a calendar year, represents about 2,000 calls, the last time I had checked. So are we really blaming the offload crisis, or whatever we want to call it, by losing one 24-hour ambulance in a year? Is that really the root of all of our problems? I think it's great anytime we can reduce the offload delays at the local hospitals, and I think there's programs out there that are going to be successful in doing so, and I know the chief is working pretty hard at that. But I still think it goes back to our call volume. When you just look at the statistics purely and you look at what the master plan projected, it failed. It failed to project the targets where they would be right now, and we're 8.6% ahead of our call volume. So, you know, regardless of the offload delays and losing one ambulance and, you know, having somebody sit at the hospital, and that's what we lose in the equivalent for the year, we're still not keeping up. We're, you know, 7.1% in 2017 and 8.6 in 2018. We can't keep this up. We can't.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. McCann. Really appreciate you coming in, and
Thank you very much
thanks
for
for
your
the
time.
work that you do and your members do every day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so
Appreciate
much.
it. Thank you.
Okay, Glenn Sutton, Energy Initiatives Ontario. Welcome, Mr. Sutton.
Thank you. Good evening, Regional Chair Redmond, Regional Councillors, and Mr. Chairman, staff, and ladies and gentlemen in the gallery. My name is, can you hear me okay up there? Okay.
If you could just speak into it, that'd be great.
That's as far as it'll go. Can you hear me okay from there or not?
That's better.
Okay. I'm here to give a presentation to increase the installation of level 2 and 3 electrical vehicle chargers in Waterloo region and related initiatives. If I could have the next slide there, please. The agenda, that's my back. Where's the controller? Is it here? Okay. There we go. That's my background. I went to the University of Waterloo, graduated in '72 in applied chemistry. My background is all down there, 18 years in council as a councillor and mayor of Kincardine and so on. But the most important part is at the bottom there. I've been the owner of a 2018 General Motors Chevrolet Volt since April of 2018, almost 15,000 miles on it. And I'm here to tell you the problems and issues I encountered just trying to get a single level 2 charger installed in the basement of my apartment building where I live. So based on that, we're going to go ahead. In the next slide, this is called a PAL, the purpose, agenda, and the length. To summarize the current requirements and the feasibility of a coordinated regional approach to install level 2 and 3 chargers and establish a task force to develop a phased plan, including cost estimates, to improve their availability in the region of Waterloo. The agenda consists of 5 points and 5 slides. I'm not going to go through them because they're on the top of each slide. It has summary and recommendations, 10-minute target, 8 minutes for the PowerPoint, 2 minutes for questions, and if someone could give me a warning at 2 minutes, that would be appreciated. So, requirements for electrical vehicle charging are found in the Ontario Building Code, the Electrical Safety Authority in Cambridge, Ontario, and also bylaws. I'd like to thank Councillor Jaworski for the planning department and the building department in the city of Waterloo for their assistance in giving me basic information. Now, comprehensive zoning bylaw 2018-050 was passed last year. If you click on that link, it should take you in there. In Appendix 1 are the 2 paragraphs that apply to this presentation. The Electrical Safety Authority, like I mentioned, is the region of Cambridge. Councilor McGarry, I met you about 2 years ago at a retirement function in Ripley. Anyway, they need to inspect and approve all electrical installations for safety, but that might be an opportunity for an approved repetitive design. Now, one sentence, the current automotive plans for EV production. In the press the last couple of years, there have been many, many articles about the plans by car manufacturers to increase their output of electric cars, light trucks, SUVs, transport trucks. We already have hybrid buses, and hydrogen fuel vehicles will be the next iteration. I can attest that 12 years ago, Bruce Power did look at having 2 hydrogen fuel buses, one in Kincardine, one in Toronto, and they both go back and forth. And I know I was working with the Chemical Engineering Department at Waterloo. Every 3 years, Ford Motor Company has not a 3-seat, but a 4-seat van that allows more people to travel on that. But it never got off the ground. The next slide, 2 comments. Climate change and smart city initiatives. And when I came here earlier tonight, I was heartened to hear about Project Neutral. I think that's a neat name. Waterloo region is well advanced in these areas, but from my research in the last month or 2, there's many, many small groups here and there working on aspects of the problem, but in this issue, there's not a coordinated approach for it. So I'm suggesting concentrate on EVCs via a single focus task force. Potential partners, regional municipalities, utilities, the local hydro companies, we have 2 in the area, electric power generation companies, OPG, Bruce Power, and many, many other utilities across the province. The universities, Waterloo and Waterloo Lutheran, community colleges, specifically Conestoga, and they have a really good woodworking program that could be helped to build this facility. But anyways, labor unions are key to this proposal because they have electricians and pipe fitters. The electricians could help wire some of these chargers into position as appropriate. Car companies, especially local dealers. My last slide will talk about the Electrical Vehicle Discovery Center in Toronto, Ontario. But I found out on Saturday when I went there that the car dealers in the Toronto area loan their electric hybrids and electric vehicles for a total of 6 months per visit or whatever. Also, there's about 35 suppliers of electrical vehicle chargers in the province, country. Finally, we should try and include related organizations, I don't know if they're still here, but in conservation and also climate change to have CO2 reduction. So the EVDC, in your council package, you should have a very small booklet. And in there, there's some color photographs and there's about 12 pages of information. In that little booklet, it summarizes the function. This is a first ever electrical vehicle discovery center or building of that function or type built in the world as far as they could determine. Been very successful. So it's in Richmond Street, north end of Toronto. There are EVs on site. There's 8 to 10 at any one time of all makes and all types. I even learned something there. To be test driven by the public, the 3 or 4 staff there will take the visitor or the family on a drive. They let them drive it. A lot of information on EV technology. Do you know what source of fuel was used in the first cars in the world? It was electricity. Okay. Anyway, their website is www.pluganddrive.ca. So the concept of the presentation is to suggest a similar center in Waterloo region to promote and advance electrical vehicle technology in the region for our country. So the summary recommendation path forward, Regional Council to form a single focused task force to develop a phased-in plan to advance the installation of VVC stations. Use local volunteers and 1 or 2 Waterloo regional staff as required to report back, and also use 1 municipal conference room somewhere. Prepare a draft budget for consideration and approval by Waterloo Regional Council. I came into the building here twice in the last 2 weeks. I got a copy of your budget documents. I've read them over, but I don't think it's wise right now to even guess a number. If it's approved for the task force, we could develop a phased-in plan, a budget, and bring it back for your consideration. So as appropriate, if we move forward to execute the modified as council directs or an approved plan. That's the end. I just want to go over 1 more slide before I go back. So Appendix 1 is a cut and paste copy of 2018-050 bylaw from City of Waterloo. In summary, a minimum of 80% of structure parking spaces for apartment buildings, multi-use residential buildings, and mixed-use buildings shall be designed electric vehicle parking spaces, meaning that the parking space is designed and constructed to be electric vehicle ready, allowing for the future installation of a minimum level 2 electric vehicle charging device. For non-residential uses, it just gives the parking size space. That's the presentation. Now, I just want to talk about one document here. What this is, you should also have in your package 2 8.5 by 11 colored printouts which talk about the EV Discovery Center. I almost cleaned them out of literature, but this one here is called, the research I did on condos, it's very confusing. Make your condo EV ready. It's a 2018 guide for condo owners, boards, and managers. So there's frequently asked questions in there. That is it in a nutshell. So with regards to this document, I've kept one. I gave one to your staff. I'd like to give a copy to Mayor Jaworski to please pass on to your building inspections department and or the planning department. I'd like to thank the 2 employees in that department that helped me out the last couple of weeks. Thank you. I'll give that to you later. That's my presentation. And based on the issues I had in electric vehicle installation, I went on September 13th to an open house at UW. It's called Power and Energy Systems Innovation Meets a Growing Industry. It was a half-day forum dedicated to linking industry with leading-edge research in power and energy systems. These technologies span the range from new materials to systems and controls of smart grids, energy transmission, power electronics, and photovoltaics. Local funding agencies specializing in funding industry and academic research collaborations will be on site to assist in making it a reality. That's about it for my presentation. And
Okay.
Any questions on that?
Thank you very much, Mr. Sutton. We do have one question. Councillor Kiefer.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Sutton, I was wondering, a very informative presentation. Thank you very much for that. And lots of information there. Good information. I was wondering, had you had the opportunity to make this presentation to other levels of government, provincial or federal?
The answer to that is no, but I've made presentations to the provincial, well, to the committees in Toronto over the last 20, 25 years on energy issues, but not on EVs because they're sort of a new technology. This is the first one I've ever done.
My thinking behind that is that perhaps, they would be interested in and possibly, issuing some grants or funding for this type of work.
That's a good question. To help you in my answer, the province about a month and a half ago put upwards of $500 million out to advance issues like this or climate change initiatives. So if the committee or task force was formed up and moved forward, that might be a source of funding for it. But remember, we could reach out to local car dealers. I'm sure they would jump at the opportunity to have their vehicles showcased and so on. And the 35 electric charger manufacturers, there was a whole bunch of them there on the wall. You could, you can kick the tires, try it out, and you can see how level 1 and 2 and 3 chargers work. I found 2 interesting things out at that building in Toronto. Tesla is installing its own charging system across North America. I was quite surprised at that, but good for them. I hope they survive. In the press, it's been quite complicated with that company. So the final comment I'd just like to make, if this ever gets off the ground and you build one of these facilities in the Kitchener region, I'd like to suggest that it be named the Sir Adam Beck Electrical Vehicle Charging Building in honor of the founder of Hydroelectric Power Commission in 1908, who happens to be from St. Jacobs. So,
thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sutton. What I'm going to suggest is that we typically don't deal with those requests that you made in your presentation off the fly. And there's a lot of different branches of government that this kind of initiative would touch upon. But we do have an ambitious climate reduction plan here at the Region of Waterloo. And I'm going to suggest that maybe you get in touch with Mr. Rod Reguer, and maybe he can provide you with some links to some other community organizations Sure. where you can maybe advance this even further.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, great. Thank you very much. All right, John McDonald, tax class ratio. Welcome, John.
Thank you kindly. Chair Redmond, Chair of this committee, Councillor Strickland, councillors, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you regarding this issue of the tax class and specifically around the MT tax class. I'd like to give consideration during your budget presentations and deliberations for a shift away from the 1.95 for the MT. I know you're not making that sort of decision as part of what you're doing tonight or over the course of the next weeks or so, but I do recognize that you are under some pressures from the various fairness levels in terms of how things shift around. So if you would like to consider where you are in your overall budget in order to help move away from this inequity, I thought I would drop by today and make a presentation if I may. We'd like to see that 1.95 ratio for older multi-unit residential properties moved down into the fairness ratio. That's been instructed long-standing from the province. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that issue, about the calls to action over the course of the last 18 years. It's true that the region has certainly made progress on this issue, although not progress for about 8 years at this point. And take a look at how the question is framed and some of the common objections to why we wouldn't do this, but some of the disparities and troubles that it engenders in our civic forum and why it would be of great benefit to do it. So my point of departure, just to borrow the region's airport here briefly, is why is it in the public interest for certain types of residents to be paying 195% of taxes based on $1 of assessment? I don't think it is, and I believe that all municipalities in Ontario are under long-standing instruction to right this inequity. It's been studied for many, many years. We're almost into decades at this point. I'm not here to endorse the overall fairness of the tax system as a whole or whether it's the best way to raise money to extend the services that the men and women at the region and at the various levels of municipality bring to our citizens, services that are well needed. I'm not here to argue whether it's generally regressive or progressive, and I am going to emphasize the approach that MPAC takes, the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, which is that they assess all properties on the basis of their value. What would I pay to buy this property? And that doesn't differ across commercial or multi-residential or a sixplex or a fourplex or a house. It's the same attitude. It's how we value property. The issue is about $25.5 million of regional taxes collected from this particular class, which represents, I think, around 6.3% of taxes collected. This is on properties, rental properties, 7 or more units that were in existence prior to April 1st, 2001. The NT tax class, as you know, takes care of newer multi-residential units that are valued in the same way, assessed in the same way, but pay tax at the 1.0. So what's a tax class? These came to us late in the last century when we moved to current value assessment, and the exercise in moving to current value assessment revealed some fundamental disparities in how taxes had been collected from various types of properties, in addition to disparities in their assessed values themselves. I'll gloss over quite a bit of this in the sense that I had wanted to provide this for your later reading pleasure in case you're having trouble sleeping late at night. The fairness ratio as established by the province, 1.0 to 1.1 for the MT class. Municipalities across the province have complied, a number of them, to a greater or lesser degree, although many jurisdictions have not, and there's a lot of wriggling going on as to how this might be complied with. And this tax ratio is set at the regional level. It is what you do. Long quotation from a call to action in 2002 from the Ministry of Finance itself at the provincial level, Property Assessment and Classification Review of Multi-Residential Class in 2002. This recommendation is rooted in a belief that all forms of residential accommodation should be subject to the same property tax rate within each municipality. This recommendation is also made in recognition of the province's long-term goal of having multi-residential and residential properties taxed at consistent rates. That's 2002. 2010, from a study done by Frank Clayton for CFAA and FRPO, government subsidies to homeowners versus renters. One of the common objections is that renters don't pay taxes or they don't pay enough taxes. But in fact, this study concludes that housing subsidies in Ontario and Canada, encompassing both direct spending programs and tax expenditure provisions, massively favor private homeowners over private renters. This favoritism to homeowners occurs even though private renters on average have household incomes approximately 1/2 of those who own homes. We have made progress. When the classes were first brought into force, your particular regional MT was at 3.21 relative to the 1.0 associated with single-family dwellings, condos, sixplexes, fourplexes, and all manners of other things. In 2010, you managed to get it down to the 1.95. There were some discussions about provincial funding and whether funding would be available to you if you were above that level, and lo and behold, you had already made that progress. But since 2010, we've been stalled. What shall we do in 2019? Where assessment and present tax class ratios can be rationally linked to ability to pay, benefits received by the payer, or the broader public interest, then there might be a rationale for different treatment of various dwelling types and tenures and citizens. I don't think the property tax system exhibits any of these traits, however, and we can do better. A consistent question we get is whether MPAC assesses properties for their current value. Do they discriminate among different classes of property? And the answer, I think, is no, because the question they answer in a variety of ways, but always the same question, is what would someone pay in the marketplace today to acquire the property, regardless of whether it's a single-family home or a rental income property. If you're going to buy a rental income property, you're going to do it on the basis of the cap rate, and it's going to come from the income. And you're also going to buy it based on what others are selling for in the marketplace. So that is the question that MPAC asks about all properties, and it's not a difference in the rental market, and certainly not a difference between a sixplex and a sevenplex. The effect of the disparity raises rents in relation to rents of other properties, decreases housing affordability, which has been, I know, an election issue here in the region. It forms a disincentive to landlords to upgrade or spend on property upkeep, since building permits trip reassessment, and each dollar of reassessment means 1.95 times the consequence. It incentivizes landlords with properties of 7, 8, or perhaps 9 units to actually take units off the market in order to lower their taxes. It creates large differences across municipalities in Ontario, furthering the case for intervention of the provincial government in local matters to ensure fairness and consistency. And we don't need that here. It creates disparity between the municipal and educational levies across the tax bases, because, of course, the province walked the walk, and for all tax bases, their levy is at 1.0 in the ratio. And it targets particular citizens of our community who, through no fault of their own, call these properties home.
Mr. McDonald, you have a minute left.
Thank you. So, how you frame the question, much of this depends on how you look at it. Are you in favor of a tax increase? Perhaps, but on your property, maybe not. We have a number of common objections that I'll try and gloss through here. It's done. We've already said everybody's taxes, this evening and in your deliberations. Not entirely true, because there are so many variables associated with things that we're going to be looking at taxes in a whole variety of ways over the course of the ratio. Tenants don't pay taxes. Landlords do. Well, they're a business and they can afford it. The reality is that tenants pay the taxes. Taxes should not be used to shape our community. Well, they do. They have and they will, and they should. We have a number of challenges that we face in the coming years, and the civic forum that we look at needs the incentives associated with good decisions that citizens make regarding what things cost. City of Hamilton took an approach associated with a disagreement with how impact values and says, we disagree, we don't want that to be how things are done, so we're going to intervene and we're going to use our tax class ratio to intervene. And in fact, because some renters get money back from the provincial government in their income taxes because they have a lower annual salary, we'll use it as a justification for raising their property taxes.
Could you wrap up, please? Can you wrap up, please, Mr. McDonald?
Yeah. So removing this disparity will benefit our community greatly. It will help us now. And I think if you take it into consideration in terms of your total budget, when we come to look at the tax class ratios in a couple of weeks or a month, you'll have some room to do that. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming in, Mr. McDonald. You've got a very good understanding of tax policy and tax ratios, probably more than the average bear, because it's fairly complicated when you get into municipal financing. So we appreciate you coming in and sharing that with us. And as you indicated in your presentation, we've been moving the ratios over time, probably over the last 15 years. And during the budget process, we don't deal with tax policy, but we will be dealing with it again likely in March. So it's like at March every year we deal with tax policy. So we'll certainly take your comments and presentation into consideration when we have that discussion in March.
Thank you kindly.
Yep, thanks very much for coming in. Okay, Andrew McCallum, Waterloo Regional Apartment Management Association. Welcome, Mr. McCallum.
Thank you very much. I'm also here to talk about tax class. This is a handout that you may have in front of you. I noted as I sat down that the footer that I've included actually has yesterday's date, so I apologize for that. Good evening, Councillor Strickland, Chair Redmond, and Budget Committee councillors. WRAMA, pronounced RAMA, is a not-for-profit association led by a board of directors who volunteer their time working to actively and positively develop and sustain the integrity of its members' business, the provision of private residential rental accommodation in the Golden Triangle. Its constitution was created in 1989, formalizing a group that had been around for years prior. My name is Andrew McCallum. I have family roots in Cambridge. I have lived in Kitchener and presently live with my partner and 3 daughters in Waterloo. I have learned a lot over my past 2 years as the president of the Waterloo Regional Apartment Management Association. Probably the steepest learning curve I experienced was connecting with political candidates of all stripes preceding the municipal elections this past fall. The response to my invitations to join me at a RAMA event were kind and receptive. It was a great opportunity for me to connect with people hoping to contribute to our community and make change. I sincerely appreciate that. In registering as a delegation, I was provided with a document titled Speaking to Regional Council, What You Should Know as a Delegation at Council and Committee Meetings. I want to assure you that I've prepared my remarks and will keep my comments to the point and will avoid wandering from the topic I came to speak about, multi-residential tax class and its impact on rental housing provision. The conversations around affordable housing, affordability of housing, and the role that RAMA plays in our region with these issues are ongoing, rich, and have left me with a number of impressions. I am honored to have the opportunity to speak to you this evening and truly hope that my impressions provoke conversation around the council table and lead to change that is better for our community. With an appreciation for the massive job our regional chair and council have in addressing community concerns and ensuring our cities and townships continue to be competitive and desirable places to learn, live, and love, I see the gap between headlines, policy, and practice as an opportunity to share my experience as the RAMA president. I ask you to consider that almost every candidate running for regional, municipal, and township councils this past fall had mentioned housing as a platform priority during their campaigns. With housing, affordable housing, and affordability of housing regularly making headlines across Canada, please consider the following. Rental housing provision in Ontario is heavily legislated at all levels of government, and I have chosen a handful of examples to illustrate this. At a federal level, the income generated by an individual who rents out a secondary suite in their home or owns a rental property is reportable to the CRA and impacted by their applicable marginal tax rate. Marijuana growth and use is legal, impacting the way in which rental housing providers strike a balance between smoke-free initiatives, property damage, and tenant user rights and tenant non-user rights. At a provincial level, an individual who rents a home to a tenant is subject to the expectations of the Residential Tenancies Act and subsequently governed by the Landlord-Tenant Board, a quasi-judicial arm of the Social Justice Tribunals of Ontario, as of January 1st called Tribunals Ontario. If a provider seeks support from the LTB, they can expect a hearing date that is assigned months from the application date and an accumulation of legal costs. Tenants in Ontario are provided free legal counsel, landlords are not. The province of Ontario mandates a residential tenancy agreement form. If one is not provided to a tenant, the tenant can demand that the landlord do so. The provincial lease, as it is commonly known, is 14 pages long. Legal addendums in the industry lease, including items on damage resulting from the growth of marijuana, bring the total number of pages to 28. At a regional level, the application of the MT multi-residential tax class is concerning as it impacts existing, those built prior to April 1st, 2001, rental properties of more than 6 units. It is the only residential category affected by a 1.95 ratio, producing tax burdens for some properties that are almost twice that of others. The secondary suite initiative, developed by the region of Waterloo and offered to residents this past fall, was part of the Ontario Renovates and a component of the Investment in Affordable Housing for Ontario program and delivered by the region of Waterloo on behalf of the federal and provincial governments. The maximum amount of rent a tenant is charged is determined by the region of Waterloo and strictly controlled by the province, with increases in rent permitted once a year and capped at 2.5%. The allowable increase for 2018 and 2019 is 1.8%. Although rents can be changed to reflect market needs when a tenant moves, quote, secondary suites that have received funding through this program must have rents at or below the approved average market rents for 15 years. And at a municipal level, if a residential rental address falls within the boundaries of the City of Waterloo, the provider is required to satisfy the residential rental housing licensing bylaw. The cost varies up to and beyond $70 per month per unit, and the licensing fees and mandatory charges levied by the City of Waterloo have been declared municipal charges and taxes, as determined by the Landlord-Tenant Board and affirmed by Divisional Court. Among the documents required for a rental license in the City of Waterloo is a police criminal record check. Did you know that a 3-bedroom condo in a 50-unit tower is not subject to rental licensing, but a 3-bedroom condo townhouse next door to it is? If the address falls within the boundaries of the City of Cambridge, water bills are set up for tenant properties in the landlord's, quote, owner's name. As a customer service, the City will also redirect bills to a non-owner tenant upon the owner's request. If a water bill goes unpaid by the end user, the bill is ultimately the responsibility of the property owner. So why does this all matter? In summary, my point to all of this is that the cumulative effect of discrepancies, contradictions, and confusion, including the application of the MT multi-residential tax class ratio from policy created at each level of government, adds to the housing issues and challenges we see today. Rental housing accounts for about 32% of households in Canada, and small rental housing providers are part of Canada's housing solution. They include someone who is 20 years old who shares a house and rents rooms to her friends, families employed by Home Hardware who see a rental house as a future residence for their children's grandparents, retirees from Grand River Transit and Budd Automotive who invested in the housing market as a strategic part of their retirement plan, senior citizens who emigrated to Canada after World War II, landed in our region and have played an integral part in providing apartment rentals to generations of local families, to international families whose children attend post-secondary studies at Conestoga College, Wilfrid Laurier University, and University of Waterloo. Quite often, the concerns of rental housing providers are dismissed. The stereotypes of landlords prevail in headlines and sensational articles that capture public interest and sell papers. My call to action. With this in mind, RAMA respectfully calls upon the Region of Waterloo Council for the following 2 actions. 1, include the Waterloo Regional Apartment Management Association as a viable partner in addressing rental housing issues in the region. And 2, review and change the discrepancies, fairness, and contradictions of the MT multi-residential tax class as it applies to rental housing provision and bring it to a standard that better reflects the housing needs of our community. On behalf of the Waterloo Regional Apartment Management Association, I'm grateful for having this opportunity to speak to you, and thank you kindly.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCallum. We appreciate that. And similarly to the previous delegation, the tax policy will be dealt with at a meeting in March. So in terms of working with the region of Waterloo, I think there might be some opportunities where we can seek the input of your association of RAMA into some of the issues we're dealing with. I'm not quite sure what specifically that would be right now. But certainly maybe through our finance department, through Mr. Dyer, maybe we can share your coordinates, and when it comes to an appropriate time where we need some input from the industry, we'll be sure to reach out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. McCallum. Okay, Jim Kay, Mr. Kay, River Road Extension. Welcome, Jim.
Good evening, Chair Strickland and committee members. I'm here today to talk about the economic planning for the River Road extension in Kitchener. My name's Jim Kay, and I'm a resident of Hidden Valley in that area. Planning for this project has been ongoing since the 1970s, and based on the information that I've seen thus far, I'm concerned about the effect that delays have had on the costs of this project, both in terms of capital cost increases and economic impact to the local residents due to traffic congestion. One of the major benefits of this project is the expected relief of the traffic congestion on Fairway Road. As a local resident who uses Fairway Road daily, the River Road extension needs to be completed expeditiously. On a considerable number of days, it takes more than 10 minutes to drive the 4-block stretch between King Street and Wilson Avenue due to congestion. Just to give you an example, twice in the past year, I've been stuck on Wabanaki Drive 10 minutes just waiting to get onto Fairview and then waiting 10 minutes to go 2 blocks to King Street. 3 other times I just turned around and went a different way. This is not a Christmas shopping event. This is a regular congestion year-round that happens. The need for traffic improvement on Fairway is well documented in many regional traffic studies, which show that this road has the highest congestion rating. This is particularly disturbing since there is a fire station located in this section of Fairway Road. It is also disturbing that other roads within the region with significantly less congestion conditions are being regularly approved and implemented, while this one sits continually neglected. The delays that have occurred in getting this project started have also affected the cost of this project. While the cost in 2001 was originally estimated at $58 million, we're now on the order of $70 million, and cost increases go up every year. My biggest concern regarding the cost is based on what I've already seen as inefficiencies on the project. There have already been 2 missed opportunities for cost savings. The first was that the bridge over Highway 8 was installed. The bridge over Highway 8 was not installed during the 3-year construction of the highway that occurred just a few years ago. If anyone was coming in and out of town during that period, you know what headache that construction was. If the bridge had been designed and installed in conjunction with that project, millions would have been saved on the River Road extension, since traffic rerouting and control measures on the highway were already in place. In addition to the cost savings, the traffic will be disrupted again on the highway for a second time, which is sure to result in a few accidents. Everyone knows that the expressway was just redone, the Victoria Street Bridge was redone, expressway, there were accidents on that. There will be accidents on this as well. This construction will also put construction workers at a greater risk, since the working areas will likely be much smaller and restricted than those that existed during the highway project. A second example of cost concern is the recent installation of the Freeport Force Main. A portion of the force main runs under Hidden Valley Road and Wabanaki Drive. In order to install the force main, Hidden Valley and Wabanaki had to be torn up. Why was this work not coordinated with the River Road extension, since these 2 roads will be torn up at that time anyway? This would have eliminated the repaving of the road, the replacement of the curb along Wabanaki, and a lot of sidewalk work, which was also performed and will be duplicated with the River Road extension. None of these costs needed to be incurred and should have been coordinated. Another error on the force main project is that it follows the path of the existing road rather than the new road alignment. Once the road moves, the alignment of the force main will encumber the old road alignment, thereby diminishing the future value of those affected parcels that could have been developed after this project was completed. Someone has to take control of these projects and actively work on the economic planning to ensure that designs are ready to go and work is done and paid for only once. Everyone talks about our tax dollars only going so far, but it seems that millions are being wasted by the delays and lack of coordination. Anyway, my recommendations for the River Road extension are as follows. First, We need to get this project started now. Every delay has resulted in millions in extra cost. Second, get this project coordinated with the other works going on. Duplication of spending is not acceptable to the taxpayers. 3, consolidate the time frame over which this project is completed. One simple way to do this is to eliminate the gaps in the planning of this project when no activity is occurring. Another is to work on both ends of the project at the same time. I know that as councillors, you have to budget for this sort of construction, and a large project such as the River Road extension needs to be spread over a few years to make it viable. But also remember that the region's capital costs are not the only costs being incurred. There's a daily cost due to the traffic delays on Fairway Road, and there will be no reduction on the traffic congestion on Fairway Road until all of the phases of River Road are fully completed. Until completely constructed, traffic is still forced to use at least a portion of Fairway Road, and the congestion will continue. Fourth, as a stopgap measure, at least adjust the light sequences at the River Road intersections with Morgan Avenue, King Street, the Mall Theatre entrance, and Wilson Avenue to provide an additional 5 to 10 seconds of green signal on Fairway during the peak rush hours to alleviate the massive congestion. In addition to this being a significant economic benefit to those using the roads, it will also improve the response time for emergency services. In fact, I do not know how the fire station on this road can be relied upon under the congested conditions that regularly occur. As a side note, I just want to say I hope that stormwater management is a prime component of the River Road extension design. If you're not aware, there have been flooding on the most downstream properties of the River Road extension drainage basin over the past 10 years. One property owner has been flooded out 4 times since 2008, and on 2 of those occasions, Hidden Valley Road was overtopped and a portion of the roadway was eroded away to the point that the natural gas pipeline was exposed to flowing water. This is a very dangerous situation. I also know that requests by one of the affected residents, Dr. John Peaver, to meet with the region to discuss stormwater management was turned down. I thank you for your time.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Kay. We appreciate you coming in, and I will say that we'll refer your request with the lighting sequences along Fairway Road. That's something we can look at very easily. So I noticed Mr. Schmidt was taking some notes there, so we'll get our traffic technologists on that right away. And I think Councillor Banovic raised the Fairway Road issue this afternoon, and he'd like to speak to it right now.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for coming in and making your presentation. I heard from other people on this issue, and in fact, just earlier today, I actually asked for staff to bring a report back at budget to start seeing how we may be able to move it forward in terms of its current 2022-23 timing from an installation point of view to see if we can move it back from that. And so we'll get some preliminary information on that in time for final budget on the 19th.
Great, thank you very much.
All right. Great, well, thanks very much for coming in, Jim. Really appreciate that. Good presentation. Okay, our next delegation is David Truman. Welcome, Mr. Truman.
Thank you. Oops. Hello, and thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. My name is David Truman. I'm passionate about building a safer, healthier, happier community, and I put my time where my mouth is, applying my passion through numerous volunteer activities. But I'm speaking this evening as a private citizen, not representing the organizations I volunteer with. I ride my bicycle as much as I can, I walk extensively, and I reluctantly drive. And I'll remind you of the obvious. At times, we are all pedestrians. I know you share my passion for a safer, healthier, happier community. Otherwise, why would you be involved in public life? But I'm sure that council struggles with setting priorities with so many competing issues and interests. I submit to you that there is one clarifying criterion: people's lives. Are people dying, incurring life-altering injuries, or suffering gross indignities? If so, this is an area that needs high priority and urgent attention. Dealing with homelessness and affordable housing certainly passes this priority test, as does the opioid crisis. But I have no experience in those areas, so I'm not going to address those this evening. I'll leave those for others who can speak with expertise. Tonight I am focusing on safety for vulnerable road users and support for active transportation. Why do these pass the priority test that I've outlined? First, because people are dying on our roads. Pedestrian safety in our region is actually deteriorating, and we have the numbers to prove that. I have no doubt the same is true for people cycling, although we don't have the supporting numbers there. We were sadly reminded of this deteriorating safety for pedestrians with the recent death on University Avenue. Secondly, active transportation is really low-hanging fruit in our fight against climate disruption. The region has committed to an 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. 49% of those emissions are from the transportation sector. Relatively small investments in active transportation can quickly give us improvements in this area. By encouraging a modal shift to walking and cycling. And make no mistake, people are dying due to extreme weather caused by climate disruption. And we can expect this to be a growing trend, unfortunately. Thirdly, people are dying from chronic disease. Active transportation is a very simple way to reduce this public burden while improving mental and physical health. The numbers are very clear. It is said that a community's real priorities are reflected in its budget. I am delighted with the proposal in the budget for a new staff position with responsibility for active transportation. This is a positive step forward, and I applaud it. Unfortunately, I see little other evidence that the region takes active transportation seriously as a priority. From what I can discern from the budget, and it is not easy, the 2019 budget has woefully inadequate spending in this area. Promises to produce more detail remain unfulfilled. Many of you on council signed the Cycle WR pledge to fund cycling infrastructure at a rate of $13 per citizen. Where is that money? The Active Transportation Master Plan has never been properly funded. Please ask this question. Did staff request an adequate budget for the Active Transportation Master Plan, and did council deny that request? Or was the request never made? I suggest to you that the answer to that question is a good hint at where the problem lies. The Waterloo protected cycling pilot has been repeatedly delayed. What little cycling infrastructure we have now is a patchwork of disconnected segments, fizzles out at the most dangerous points of conflict, features roll curbs, an invitation for vehicles to invade the so-called safe space. Our otherwise excellent trails fail to be suitable for all ages and abilities due to the dangerous crossings at regional roads. Multi-use paths are left unsigned and unpainted, setting up unnecessary conflict between those walking and those cycling, and allowing drivers to point their fingers at scofflaw cyclists riding on the sidewalk. It has happened. It was in a letter to the record. Once again, this is so easily solved with some signs and some paint. We're told we're working on it, but when will we see results? Road safety fares just as badly. Pedestrians are left to cope with long stretches of regional roads with no safe crossing point. Drivers routinely exceed the speed limit on these urban highways by 20 kilometers per hour or more with impunity. Pedestrians need to use beg buttons with long waits on heavily traveled routes, making it clear that cars take a higher priority. If used, beg buttons should give a right-of-way for pedestrians in 15 seconds or less. Best practices from other communities are not adopted. Lower speed limits, automatic speed enforcement, pedestrian scrambles, pedestrian advanced signals. The list goes on and on. Bus stops are seemingly the last places to be cleared of snow, often days after a storm, leaving dangerous banks just inviting someone to slide down the bank and under the wheels of the bus. Worst of all, senior staff are on record saying putting safety first would inconvenience people. To my knowledge, this statement has never been withdrawn, qualified, or challenged by council. So we are left with education campaigns which are known to be ineffective at reducing deaths and serious injuries. Indeed, your current campaign does not even set out goals in this area in terms of actually reducing deaths and injuries. Just this past Sunday, Michael Enright broadcast on CBC an essay on the growing number of pedestrian deaths in our cities. In it, he said, "City councils don't care. If they did, they would lower speed limits on all streets." And before you say under your breath that speed limits don't work, I will point out that a recent study in Boston showed that lowering speed limits did indeed reduce speeds proportionally. Please show yourselves to be the exception to Michael Enright's point. Show that you do care. Low-hanging fruit that could be undertaken this year: pilot a pedestrian scramble, pilot advanced pedestrian signals and dedicated bike signals, examine every point where a trail crosses a regional road and make as many safer as possible in this calendar year. Pilot protected bike lanes on more regional roads than just the Waterloo pilot, using temporary curbs, planters, or bollards. Other cities have done this successfully and rolled out many kilometers of protected bike lanes in short order. Engage with public stakeholders on solving the tougher problems, some of our problematic intersections. The budget needs are relatively modest, but if you're looking for budget for these measures, put the road budget on a diet and you won't have to lose much weight to fund these measures. I plead with you to take leadership, take charge of the priorities, and demand that staff put forward plans and spending that will propel the region forward on a different path this year, one that places human lives ahead of driver convenience. We are tired of waiting for next year. Lives depend on it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Truman. Thanks very much for coming in. We do have a question, Councillor Urbanovic.
Thanks, and thanks for coming in, Mr. Truman, and sharing some of your concerns with us. Just on the issue of bus shelters, and I may ask staff to comment on this as well in terms of what our expected service standard is, because it is something I regularly hear a complaint on, and quite frankly see myself, as I'm going through the city, and so I'm wondering if you can, like, how often do you notice this, or do you see this as being a problem in terms of a lack of snow removal at these sites? Is it on occasion, or is it a regular issue?
It's been a few years since I took the bus regularly. Back a couple of years ago, I did take the King Street bus every day. And it was a regular occurrence that the snowbanks were left there, you know, like obviously it's a problem in the first 24 hours if someone is using the bus. I do think it should get a priority perhaps even higher than roads. These snowbanks were there for days after, not just 24 hours.
Okay, and certainly it is a concern. Just on the issue of cycling, it is something that Councillor Galloway and I have asked for Budget Day, both in terms of a report to come back that aggregates the amount of dollars that we're investing in cycling at the region, but also to look at how we could advance the notion of a protected minimum grid. As you know, in some of our municipalities, we're making those investments at the lower tier, and I think some of us are hoping that we'll be able to see that advance here at the region as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Vanovic, and thanks very much for coming in, Mr. Truman. Appreciate you sharing your views.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Tessa Starkey. Welcome.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Tessa Starkey, and I live and work in Kitchener, and my bike is my vehicle of choice for getting around. The region has said that active transportation is a priority, so I was hopeful that this budget would reflect that. However, it's not clear to me exactly how much funding there is for active transportation. I see a few line items for things like improvements and connections for multi-use trails and some funding for the protected bike lane pilot. This is great and I'm excited, but the total funding for active transportation appears to be relatively low, not even meeting the amount the region had estimated for the active transportation master plan. What I understand of this budget doesn't inspire confidence that it's making meaningful progress towards creating useful bike infrastructure for people of all ages and abilities. I want to share why quality cycling infrastructure is important to me as a resident and to our growing region as a whole. Cycling has brought me many benefits. I get a ton of exercise just going about my day, and I don't have to maintain, pay for, or park a car. Most of the time, it's a pleasant experience, enjoying being outside and connected to the community. However, this calm is punctuated with moments of fearing for my life. When I get to the inadequate parts of the bike infrastructure where I'm terrifyingly exposed to cars, like when the bike lane ends and I need to merge with 50-kilometer-per-hour traffic and hope that the drivers see me, or when I need to cross 2 lanes of traffic on Fisher-Hallman to get to the left turn lane. My partner often commutes by bike, and on those days, I always have a niggling fear that he won't come home. I have already had to pick him up from the hospital once when he suffered a broken collarbone in a hit and run. I also worry about him when he doesn't bike because he's missing out on something that has been extremely beneficial to his physical and mental health. 60% of the residents of Waterloo region have said that they are interested in cycling, but are rightly concerned for their safety. It saddens me that the dangerous gaps in infrastructure prevent my fellow residents from experiencing the benefits of cycling. Cycling infrastructure is an important investment for this region's future. As our population is projected to grow, and if the current trends continue, that will come with a significant increase in car traffic and the need for widening and building of more roads. If we don't invest in active transportation to divert many of these trips to more space-efficient modes of transportation, we will have to keep paying for the ever-expanding road system. The region is heading in the right direction by building the LRT, but the train doesn't go to everyone's doorstep. So for the LRT to be most effective, we need to enable riders to walk or bike to and from the train safely and conveniently. As our region grows, We risk urban development encroaching on our farmland and natural areas. To prevent this, we must grow denser rather than sprawl outward, and that will be difficult to do when we are building large swaths of roads and parking lots. I urge you to reevaluate funding for active transportation infrastructure in this budget. I want to be sure that the funding is there to create a safe and connected infrastructure that will enable residents to leave their cars behind for more everyday trips. I'm encouraged by some things I've seen in municipal budgets, like the protected bike lanes in Kitchener. However, the municipalities are crisscrossed by regional roads, so they cannot create a comprehensive and convenient cycling network on their own. The region needs to lead the way on making cycling a viable and appealing transportation option. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Tessa. I don't see any comments or questions, but just to assure you that we remain committed to cycling infrastructure, and as Councillor Banovic indicated earlier, there will be a motion coming forward to our budget meeting on February 19th.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming in. Okay, one final delegation, Harold Druitz. Welcome, Harold. You've been here a long time. And you stayed here. So you registered late, so you know you have 5 minutes, right?
I'm going to be late picking up my wife. She's on call tonight.
All right.
So, first of all...
I just want to be clear, Harold, you got 5 minutes.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
First of all, I want to congratulate you all. I see lots of new faces here, and congratulations, and especially Chair Redmond. And last night, when I was at a meeting at the Waterloo waste site on herb and iron needles, I got a text from one of my supporters that you are now the chair of the of Marco, chair of mayors and regional chairs of Waterloo. Congratulations. So before I get to the budget percent increase and so on, I'm very concerned when I go past hospitals in the region and I see police cars and ambulances there. I won't talk about the police cars, but I do want to talk about the ambulances. It's very concerning, and I did listen to the presentation that was done earlier, and I'm just wondering whether you thinking outside the box in that you're thinking of not getting additional ambulances. I fail to understand why ambulances have to be there with two paramedics. Why can't one paramedic be with the stretcher? And why can't the other paramedic go back to the base station and through some other system, administration system, pick up the other paramedic in some way, shape, or form, and the stretcher with a much less complex vehicle, and therefore free up the ambulance to mitigate code red, and today I also heard that there is a code yellow. So if one paramedic could go with the ambulance to a home base instead of sitting there for who knows how long, I would appreciate that consideration. Now, as far as the tax increase is concerned, I've been here often enough that you know that I always talk about this consumer price increase, and I know that the region's basket of goods is different than the consumer's basket, and even the region is different than the city of Kitchener. All I can say is I took my 2011 tax bill, my 2018 tax bill. We did not do any major renovation to our property, and I was surprised at the numbers myself. There was a couple of years there where CPI was very low, and I guess the region's tax increase were significantly higher. But I must tell you, and I checked my numbers, my tax increase for 2018 over 2011, or the period from 2012 to 2018, 7 years, was 19.5% increase versus CPI of 10.8, which is an increase of 80.6%. That's not sustainable. And to Mayor Burbannik's credit, using the same assessment, the same tax bills, okay, and I know that the city of Kitchener took out the water and the wastewater and the storms water, but as far as the taxes were concerned, they only increased their taxes by 10.1%, as opposed to a CPI of 10.8% for actually, surprisingly, lower tax increase of 6.5% over that period of time. The other point I want to make is, for the first time, I did do the survey, the regional survey, because some residents were telling me that, we really can't make an informed decision on some things. And just an example, on the questions regarding the GRT and the transit plan and so on. The questions continually talk about plan. And really, to make an informed decision, it would be a lot better if you could also say what the actual users were, say in 2015 versus the plan, what the actual users were in 2017 versus the plan. And I suggest that way we could make a much more informed decision and hopefully better result of the survey. Along with transit, I'd like to suggest that you try that your goal be, or I would appreciate a goal of 50% transit revenue to cover the cost of the transit, as opposed to 40% or lower than 50%. I'd like to share 50-50. Those are my main points. So I guess I stay within the 5 minutes.
No,
that's not bad.
You did a great job, Harold. You're right, pretty well right at 5 minutes. So thanks so much for coming in. We have no other questions or comments, but we do appreciate you coming in, and it's important for us as committee and council to recognize that we don't take raising taxes lightly. We understand the impact it has on people, particularly people that have fixed incomes. So we weigh all of that in mind when we set our budget, and this year that'll be on February 19th, and you coming here has some impact on that discussion. So thank you very much.
May I say one more thing?
Sure.
I'm sorry. I forgot to say that, okay, the 3.7% increase that was talked about today is CPI is about 2.3% for 2018. It's 60% higher than the CPI. So that is a concern, and it's a concern for especially senior citizens on fixed income, as you said. Mr.
Duly
Chairman.
noted.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trevis. Okay, this is a public meeting, so anyone else in the audience who would like to speak on the 2019 budget? Calling once, twice, and a third time, so thank you very much. No more delegations this evening. Communications, there's some correspondence there from Mr. Gashel with respect to the River Road extension. Any other business from committee? Seeing none, a motion to adjourn. Councillor Foxton, Councillor Kiefer, all those in favor? We're adjourned. Thank you very much. February 19th is budget day. Thanks.